In this video, I cover highlights as I finish my space exploration run and end with a quick retrospective. Naquitite mining sucks. It's the last resource, so this is probably fair for game balance, but it still sucks. It takes about 70 naquitite ore to produce a single ingot. It mines really slowly, and it only stacks to 10. This large hauler holds 512 stacks, but can still only carry enough ore to produce about 70 ingots. Since I can only fit 23 miners on this ore patch, it still takes nearly 2.5 minutes to mine that much ore, even with a massive area beacon. So far, I've been targeting about 30 science per minute for Tier 4 science research. That requires about 58 naquitite ingots per minute, which is about 25 of these ships hauling, and about 120 miners spread across several ore patches. Backing up a second, this is the asteroid field I'm pulling naquitite from. In this game, I got lucky. This is the closest field, and it's got decent naquitite. I had to scan a lot of territory to find adequate patches, but it got me through. There is one field with better naquitite, but, yeah, not gonna happen. In the end, I settled for 24 signs per minute. My bottleneck was production on Novice, and I decided that 24 was good enough, especially as I just about finished researching everything I needed by then. 15 ships is a lot, but once you've got one working, stamping out another 14 just takes some resources, and they're fun to watch hauling goods back and forth. I did have to produce a ton of ion steam to keep these things going, but whatever, it wasn't hard. Many people avoid this transport challenge by doing the first stage of processing in the asteroid field. That requires 8 times less space, so one ship per ore patch is plenty. But you can't use production modules in space, so you have to give up a 40% or more productivity boost, which means you need a lot more miners. No thanks. I already had to hit 4 ore patches to place the 66 miners I ended up with. Since I used the best ore patches first, I'd need to hit 2 more ore patches to make up for the productivity loss. It was far easier to just blueprint more ships. Meanwhile, scrap processing backed up again. I did some better belt balancing, but that only got me so far, and science was really pumping. So I moved all scrap processing to the end and just used the mall bus to request scrap. I also put science and significant data production at the end, as they can also use the mall bus to request science packs and insights. Produced significant data and scrap byproducts easily fit into one belt to route back to an earlier part of the bus. With science pumping, I simplified and sped up copper and steel. Iron was fine for some reason, then a lot of other things like plastic and sulfur. And then a train deadlocked. Actually, 4 trains deadlocked. I optimistically thought I hadn't screwed up the rails this run. I always build the rail blueprints fresh each run. Maybe next time I'll do it flawlessly. Anyway, here is my original 4-way intersection. Do you see the problem? It's pretty hard to deadlock, but if you have trains on all of these tracks at the same time, deadlock. Oops. I needed signals on each of the right turns. Oh well, fixed. Oh, I screwed up this iridium train too. I deserve this one. I knew it was a mistake to pull ingots from the station in just a matter of time before LTN requested ingots the station couldn't deliver. I changed the inserter to only pull ingots if the station has more than a train's worth. A bit of a hack, but I'm lazy and didn't feel like adding a whole new station. With Deep Space Science 2, I pivoted. I have a sushi belt up from the main bus, and everything produced goes back to the bus down a different sushi belt. So, the data cards go down to the bus just to be grabbed by the up sushi belt for catalog production. It's a bit circular, but it's way simpler than what I was doing before. Before, I'd send junk down and data cards up, which isn't too complicated, but some data cards are needed for other things, so they would also go down sometimes. This was true for science as well. I'd direct insert science to the next tier, but also send it down to the bus for research. The new model is way simpler. I wish I'd thought of it sooner. Remember how I said that having lots of ships wasn't a big deal? You could just blueprint more? I lied. I ran into a major headache with multiple ships sharing the same docking berth. In space exploration, it turns out, a new ship can land immediately after an old one launches. The problem is that I was sending a launch signal to the ship that just left. That's why it left. If a new ship lands immediately, it might see that launch signal and launch without unloading. I must not have been noticing the ship change, since I only check for a ship every 5 ticks, so I added a hair trigger to detect the instant a ship launches. But that wasn't enough. New ships would still sometimes launch immediately after landing. I needed to cancel the launch signal faster. So I built this much simpler landing berth. As soon as there is no ship signal, this inserter will pick up the rock and the launch signal will go away. If one tick has no ship signal, the very next tick will have no launch signal. This should work if I get at least one tick with no ship. Otherwise, it would send the new ship back to Novice, still holding sulfuric acid. That ship would eventually unload into this warehouse. As long as there's no sulfuric acid here, it must have been working. Ah, crap. A new ship apparently can land the exact same tick that an older ship launches. Well, damn. Circuit logic has no way of knowing the old ship ever launched. That kinda sucks. What finally worked is based on this text in the Informatron. A ship only checks the launch signal once per second. Since the ship spends about 2 seconds doing the integrity check before launching, that means I can send the launch signal for a full second and then just let it drop. The ship will still be there, but it read the signal. It will launch. I still use the hair trigger to detect launches because I still need to know when I can unload the new ship. But the hair trigger can fail if a new ship lands the same tick the last one launched, so I also added a 10-second timer. When that fires, the berth just assumes a new ship must be there and it starts unloading. Wow, this ended up being way more complicated than I expected. Next time I'll build a simpler state machine like this one, and just wait 10 seconds to move from the go state back to the unload. This is still a bit complicated, but as you can probably tell, I don't mind a little bit of complexity. I built this nutty thing for Arcosphere recipes. Arcospheres can be a lot of fun, but using them requires complex logic. Keeping this as simple as I could, I still ended up with a mess. Arcospheres are never destroyed, but switch between 8 different forms. Those switches are unpredictable, and this mess is all about balancing my supply so I have the forms I need. It's good fun if you want a hardcore circuit challenge. Then I hit a limit with the one belt I had going to Novice. With science flowing well, I suppose this was inevitable. One belt to supply the space science factory was no longer enough either. Time to rebuild my logistics hub again. I rebuilt my space hub again with a bunch of changes based on what I had learned. Almost all goods going to Novice go through this warehouse and shipped by train. This warehouse is direct fed by the Nakotite ships via 2 belts, but also by LTN pulling assorted supplies from the different colony ships. Generic Factorio trains pull goods from this warehouse down to Novice, where they're unloaded onto 2 belts for distribution. I left room here to add more belts if needed, but 2 has been plenty. Trains deliver Novice goods to this warehouse, where it can route them to the other colonies through this storehouse bus. Space science needs pull from this bus here. Goods needed by this warehouse for space are delivered by LTN from whichever colony is delivering it. I also made the ship unload, load, and launch state machine much simpler by tracking a stone on a belt loop. The much more complicated thing I built last time was an experiment with entirely digital state machines in Factorio. I don't regret making them, but I'll be happy if I never do it again. I now also have a ship dedicated to just Vitamelange extract. This is the second ship coming from my Vitamelange colony, so I built a berth for it. And a whole separate berth for the dedicated Iridium ship coming from my Vulcanite Iridium world. Along the way, I decided I should build some Tier 9 production modules for research. As I set that up, I computed that it would take about 30 minutes of a fast belt full of Vitamelange extract to build one. Wow, so I had some time to kill. Turns out there's an optional ending for this mod that requires visiting pyramids in the nearby stars. I wasn't sure what all was required, but started getting some pictures of the pyramids in preparation. I knew I needed them for something. At first, I used this small ship, but I'd run out of fuel and have to fly back home too often. So I built this beast with a detachable captain shuttle for heading to a planet. Since the shuttle is small, it doesn't use much fuel to launch. This lets me visit lots of planets without returning home to refuel nearly so often. My apologies for the ugly design of this ship. The typical design is basically a wedge at top and a box at the bottom, which is what I use for all my other ships, but this was my first large capital ship and I tried to make it look stylish. Sadly, I failed. I thought it would be cool if it had some large gun sections sticking out from the sides and jetting forward like torpedo launchers, and the shuttle needed an engine, so I stuck it at the back with the engines and separated the walls so I could quickly detach and reattach it. But that makes the whole ship look like it has arms and legs and a detachable cockpit for the captain. I'm not a visual artist. I knew the epic ending had something to do with the anomaly. The anomaly is a fixed distance from everything, which can make it a great shortcut. It is also really easy to miss since it doesn't show up on the galactic map. If I didn't know there was an anomaly, I probably wouldn't have even noticed it. Anyway, I finished the epic ending. I almost bailed. I poked at my sandbox game to get some idea of how it worked and worried that it would be all grind and no fun. So I watched a spoiler video from Paxtorio to get a rough idea of what was required. Ultimately, I wasn't ready to be done with this run, so I did it. It isn't for everyone, but I had fun with it. So what would I do differently next time? For one, the storehouses the trains dump stuff into in space should be part of the same chain of storehouses that feeds my space base. I didn't think of that until after I was done. I only get 90 items per second with these two belts, but direct insertion would have gotten me 111. Not a significant difference, but would have been more elegant. I would definitely use a mall bus like this again next time. It rocked. However, I also noticed while making this video that when science was really flying, I hit the throughput limit of my main bus. The 4 inserters can move the equivalent of 2.5 fast belts of goods. That builds quite a lot of space science, but if I did it again, I'd build bigger. I might use full 6x6 warehouses. That would increase throughput by 50% with 6 stack inserters. But space pipes can only cross 5 spaces, so I guess I'd have to limit myself to 5 inserters or pass the liquid via barrels or something? I don't know. Maybe I'd make a few parallel rows and cross-connect them. That'd probably work. I'm not happy with how hard it is to set up a planet colony. Storehouses unlock early, and you can unlock Coverx quickly after you get to space, so setting up nuclear-powered colonies early with warehouse balls shouldn't be hard. And once I unlock spaceships, it gets easier to visit colonies and patch mistakes, but it still feels tedious. Every colony is unique. Some don't have water and I have to ship ice. Sometimes oil is rare and I either ship it or tap distant oil wells. Sometimes I have to build rails to hit distant ore patches. And sometimes I have to deal with biters or even biter meteors. The unique requirements of every colony is probably why it feels tedious. Still, it seems like with more practice they should become easy to set up. There are a lot of things I wouldn't change. I'm happy with the storehouse malls and how easy those have been to use. When I have storehouses, I'm never building a spaghetti mall again. Using the storehouse mall as the primary bus in space was amazing. It was fast, easy to use. It let me focus on bigger problems without thinking about how to move stuff around. I also love the design I pivoted to with Deep Space Science 2. As long as a single space belt is enough for the needed supplies, this is hard to beat. There are parts of biological science that produce a lot of stuff, and I need to separate them out so they don't clog up a single belt. But when everything goes back to the bus, you just have so much flexibility with placing buildings. You also don't have to worry much about unexpected demands. Did you know that time-space anomaly data requires 4 different astrometric data cards? I didn't. Fortunately, I had the mall bus, so it wasn't hard to tweak my astrometrics builds to send cards to the bus so I could place them for time-space anomaly data. I should have just put them in the bus in the first place. I'll do that next time. The mall bus doesn't help with fluids. Fluids are generally a mess. I don't know if that can be fixed. The fluid bus worked fine and I enjoyed the weird different length pipes, but routing pipes into the different factory columns felt pretty messy. Oh well. As always, I should leave more space. I had enough ultimately, but got lazy near the end, reducing space set aside for fluids. I had to perform some creative routing when I realized I wasn't done building. Oh well, my fault, and I paid the price. Stop doing that. Just leave space. Next time, I'll route the Nakotite haulers through the anomaly. Since the anomaly is a fixed distance from everything, it can be used as a shortcut for things that are normally quite far away. I tested this out once, traveling from novice orbit to a remote star. Flying to the anomaly first and then to the star took 8 minutes. The direct flight would have been 26. This way, I can pull Nakotype from the best fields without concern for distance. A relay station at the anomaly would need a circuit signal to route ships properly, but that should be easy to do by peeking at the cargo to decide which way to send them. Spaceships aren't for everyone. Using cargo rockets from start to finish is easier, but I pivoted to spaceships as early as possible this run and had a ton of fun doing it. Setting up spaceports can be complicated, but you can make them much simpler. As long as you have a good fuel source, and hitting a nearby Oriole planet makes this easy, then you can send ships back and forth as often as you like for free. There is no reason to do something as complicated as I did. Don't copy me. I'm weird.